Have you ever looked at someone and realized they are generating 10 times, perhaps 20 times more capital than you? You can't figure out how that gap exists. It isn't because they are smarter. It isn't because they work 20 times harder. Somehow they are simply playing a completely different game. I recall asking myself that specific question years ago following a quiet conversation with a mentor. We were discussing a figure online and a name you would instantly recognize. I asked, half joking, "What do you think he actually pulls in?" My mentor didn't blink. He said, "On a slow month, probably 600,000 or 700,000." I laughed initially. Then I stopped laughing. This was around 2014 or 2015, and numbers like that did not exist in my reality. Not even close. That question haunted me. How does a man arrive at that level? What I eventually uncovered changed my view of money forever. You can condense what you currently earn in a year into what you earn in a month. When that clicks, it doesn't just alter your income, it rewires your psychology. This wasn't a motivational slogan, it was a violent financial awakening. In fact, it was the first real breakthrough I ever had with money. It traces back to the late 90s. I was broke, frustrated, and searching. I picked up a book many of you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. When I read it, the fog lifted. It felt like I had been staring at money through frosted glass, and suddenly it was clear. If I had to distill that book into one sentence, it is this: wealth is built by creating income-producing assets. That is it. Most men stay broke not because of laziness, but because they are the only mechanism producing money in their lives. When they stop, the income stops. Machiavelli warned of this centuries ago. A man who depends entirely on his own labor is always at the mercy of circumstance. Power belongs to those who build structures that outlive their own effort. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They do not chase income. They accumulate assets, and income follows. As one modern thinker put it cleanly, income follows assets the way a shadow follows a body. You don't chase the shadow, you move the body. This is where it sounds crazy, but it is true. It is easier to make $1 million in a month than in a year. It is easier to make it in a week than a month. It sounds insane until you understand leverage. And I am not repeating something I heard at a seminar. I am telling you how I live. Machiavelli would nod at this because he understood that power concentrates. It does not distribute evenly. Consider this principle of movement. Imagine two men racing. One runs, the other rides a bicycle. The man on the bike goes farther, faster, and uses less energy. Give them both bikes, and one gets in a car. Same outcome. Upgrade to a jet. Every time, the man with leverage covers more distance with less effort. The uncomfortable lesson is this: men making vastly more money are not outworking you. They are out-leveraging you. They aren't sprinting harder. They changed vehicles. The tragedy is that most men are trained from childhood to respect small progress over long periods. Grind, endure, be patient. Machiavelli would call this conditioning useful for subjects, not for builders. If you keep men focused on slow steps, they never ask how to leap. Leveraged work will always dominate laborious work. It produces more, costs less energy, and compounds faster. Yet most people never look for leverage. They ask what it costs to buy it. They never ask what it costs to live without it. So pause and reflect. Have you been trying to win by running harder or by changing vehicles? If this idea hits you, comment one or two words right now: leverage or different game. Lock the thought in. If this resonates, subscribe and join a community of men done playing small games and learning to build power quietly. Because we are going deeper into how leverage actually works and why most people resist it. Why doesn't everyone use it? The answer sits deeper than money. People are taught to think linearly. But if a principle is true, it repeats across domains. Machiavelli studied war and politics as mirrors of the same rules. Disruptive thinkers don't invent from nothing. They recombine ideas. They steal principles from one arena and weaponize them in another. That is why the transportation metaphor matters. If one man runs and another flies, the one who flies wins. Distance and speed are determined by leverage, not fairness. Nature rewards efficiency, Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors those who bend conditions, not those who submit to them. The marketplace doesn't reward exhaustion, it rewards positioning. When someone makes 10 times more than you, it's because they have placed themselves in a position where effort scales instead of caps. They change the system they operate inside, but conditioning runs deep. You were taught, show up, try harder, wait your turn. That programming works for obedience, not freedom. Leveraged work scares people because it exposes a painful truth. If leverage exists, grinding harder was never the answer. Many men have built their identity around effort. They wear burnout like a badge of honor. So when you suggest leverage, they react emotionally. It costs money, or I don't have time. What they are really saying is, if this is true, I've been playing the wrong game. The real question is, what is it costing you to stay where you are for another 5 years? Machiavelli would say, delay is a trap. Men wait for certainty while power moves. Learning leverage feels expensive because it forces you to slow down in a world that worships motion. But running in the wrong direction faster gets you nowhere. You face a fork in the road. Keep working harder and hoping, or pause to acquire a new vehicle. Once you see this principle, you cannot unsee it. Staying in the same place becomes a conscious decision, not an accident. Before we proceed, check in with yourself. Do you agree with this, or does it make you uncomfortable? Both reactions matter. Drop a comment with one word capturing how this landed: truth, resistance, or awakening. Your response reveals more about your current position than you might think. Now we break down exactly where money comes from, why most effort is capped by design, and how wealth only begins once you cross a specific, invisible line. Once you accept that leverage matters more than effort, the next question is unavoidable. Where exactly does leverage come from? Most men get confused here because they use the wrong measuring stick. They believe that if they deliver more value, they should automatically be paid more. It sounds logical, but it is mostly false. More value at the wrong level doesn't create exponential income. It just creates exhaustion. Machiavelli warned about this. Men who serve well are often rewarded with more service, not more power. Value is not flat, it is stacked. There are levels, and they are not equal. The lowest level is implementation. This is where most people live their entire lives. Here, you trade physical effort multiplied by time for money. You lift, fix, type, drive. There is nothing wrong with honest work, but understand the limitation. Your body is a physical resource. Time is a finite resource. Multiply two limited things, and you get a limited result. That isn't an opinion. That is math. Machiavelli would call this dependence. A man dependent on his own labor has no margin and no protection from fortune. The next level up is unification. Here you manage people instead of doing everything yourself. You use organization and delegation. You multiply effort through others. Income rises, but there is still a ceiling. You are limited by how many people you can oversee. You are no longer running, but you are still pedaling. Machiavelli would say you have secured a minor post, not sovereignty. A critical shift happens here. Floors matter more than ceilings. You want a minimum you refuse to drop below, not a maximum you are afraid to exceed. The next level is of communication. Here, income detaches from physical effort. You use words to create value. This confuses people who believe real work must be painful. They ask, how can talking make more than lifting bricks? Money doesn't pay for difficulty. It pays for impact, reach, and influence. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. Whoever controls perception controls reality. Communication moves people. It shapes belief. That is why a single speech can mobilize nations, while 1,000 laborers remain replaceable. Language is psychological, and psychology scales. The highest level is imagination. This is where ideas, capital, and vision combine. Money is used to create more money. Systems are designed. Dynasties are formed. Machiavelli described this as the domain of founders and rulers, not servants. At this level, limits dissolve. The only real constraints are the self-imposed stories you absorbed early about who you are allowed to be. Pause and reflect. Where have you been operating? Implementation, management, or communication? Drop a comment with where you actually are, not where you want to be. Honesty matters. Once you understand the top level, imagination numbers that once felt massive suddenly feel small. Years ago, I thought I had figured money out. I was doing well. Then a mentor told me, "You are doing well, but you are standing right before a much bigger door." Machiavelli would describe that moment as the collapse of a false ceiling. He warned that men often mistake comfort for conquest. Imagination is dangerous because it exposes how artificial your limits really are. You stop asking, "How do I earn more?" and start asking, "What can I build that earns without me?" This is where recession talk stops mattering. Men above this line don't participate in downturns the same way. When others freeze, the imaginative expand. They acquire. Machiavelli taught that fortune favors decisiveness, especially in chaos. Here is the shift most never make. They think progress comes from choice, but choice leaves exits open. Decision is different. To decide means to cut off alternatives. Machiavelli was blunt. Hesitation breeds weakness. Once a man truly decides who he will become, circumstances rearrange around that certainty. Practicality is key here. You don't need to be a celebrity. The reliable path is communication. Writing, teaching, publishing what you have tested. I wrote a book years ago without knowing if anyone would care. The book wasn't the asset, the message was. You don't get paid for how hard something is. You get paid for how many people it reaches and how deeply it moves them. The simplest formula I know is this: read more than you consume. Think more than you react. Speak about what you've tested. Write what you've learned. Share it consistently. Ideas compound the same way capital does. When you operate from imagination instead of labor, yearly income collapses into months. Before we close, reflect honestly. What is one belief about money that was artificially limiting you? Drop it in the comments, or simply comment, "No ceiling," or "Decided." If this resonates, subscribe. Join a community of men who are done confusing effort with progress, who are learning to think strategically and build leverage that lasts. This isn't hype, it is structure. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it.